And we're back here at WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Game 7 was last night up in New York at Madison Square Garden. Rangers get the victory, defeating the Philadelphia Flyers by a final score of 2-1. Now joining us on the hotline is a man that covers the Rangers for Newsday in New York, and that's Steve Zipay. Steve, it's Zach and Chase here in Philly. How you doing?
I'm doing well, boys. How are you?
Well, we're doing great, and we appreciate a few minutes. And whenever you have a Game 7, you look for that unsung hero or a guy that's looking to redeem himself. Last night, Carcillo, who's got scratched in a few games in this series, had that goal in Game 3, had that big first goal. You saw Pouliot, who's been in the box for most of this series, come up big and get that game-winning goal. How about their performances last night in Game 7 when you look at Carcillo and Pouliot?
Well, they're both kind of under-the-radar pickups. I mean, Pouliot has bounced around with a bunch of teams, and the Rangers signed him as a free agent, last summer. And he had a really impressive season. He's got some skill. He can get lost at times, mentally. But as we saw at some points with his penalties in the series, and Carcillo was really only acquired because Derek Dorsett broke his leg and midway through the season, and the Rangers were looking for a fourth liner, and Carcillo was available. I think they gave up a fifth-round pick or something. So you're right. Sometimes there are unsung heroes that come to the forefront in the playoffs. In any sport, really. It happens in baseball, in the World Series. It happens in in the NBA or even in the NFL. So this is that time of year for those guys who really need to raise their level, and when they do, they're very often successful.
I thought play was pretty even, especially in the shot count in that first period, and you always look at a Game 7 and see how the road team comes out and respond. Rangers were looking to get that first goal, and they got it in the second period. But the second period, Rangers had excellent forecheck, as Mark Stahl was talking about it after the game, and their offense really started to get going. And you couldn't make the argument that they should have had more than 2 goals. But Steve Mason has been absolutely phenomenal in this series. He missed the first 3 games, got implemented late in that third game when they pulled Emery. But could this have been a different series? Could the Flyers could have won this series if Mason was able to be healthy from the start?
Yeah, I think it's very possible. It's possible. Of course, you can never tell with injuries in the playoffs. I mean, the Rangers are also missing Chris Kreider, who had 17 goals this season. So, and Kreider didn't play at all in the series. He may eventually play against Pittsburgh, but who knows? But the other thing you can't discount, speaking about the road and home ice advantage, 2 of the 3 Game 7s last night, the road teams won. So it was very possible for the Flyers to win last night. The home ice advantage didn't work very well in Colorado and in San Jose. But the other thing I would say that I was very impressed with by the Flyers was the penalty killing. The penalty killing was excellent, and the Rangers cannot do that against Pittsburgh coming up. They can't go 0 for 21. But I thought the Flyers had a very good series, and I thought they needed a little bit more from their bigger guns. Wayne Simmons usually kills the Rangers, and he really only had 1 good game. And the Rangers forechecking, as you said, took advantage of the Flyers' defense, which I still think is a little too slow. I think the pace of high-level NHL hockey has picked up over the years. The Rangers are sort of adapting to that, and it includes the defense. The defense has to move the puck quicker and get out of the zone quicker. I think the Flyers need a little help there forward.
We're spending a few minutes with Steve Zipay. And Steve, the Rangers moved to 6-0 all-time in Game 7s at Madison Square Garden, but they have struggled in those elimination games in years past. How much of a relief is it for this team to take down a team that had given them trouble in a series in a big-time situation and move on to the second round against a beatable Pittsburgh Penguins team?
Yeah, you could see it in the locker room last night. There was a lot of relief. It's always tough to get through the first round of a series because I think you gain a little confidence in it. I think it's a relief not to go home early. I think you're preparing for a long run, even if you finish, as a wild card. You're always kind of hoping, and it's a big relief. And and they rely on Henrik Lundqvist. They always have relied on him every playoff series. they've been in since he's, been with the Rangers as a starter for 7 or 8 years. He started, I guess, 72 consecutive playoff games now, and really, his record has been very good. There's no Stanley Cup. They haven't even been to the finals, but generally, the Rangers' history is they can't score enough to support him. They're going to have to certainly score against the Penguins to move forward again this year.
Rick Nash has struggled throughout the course of his career in postseason play, but last night I thought he had a pretty impressive performance. Now, he didn't register a goal, but he had multiple opportunities to put the puck in the back of the net. It's got to be a little bit of a confidence booster for him as well, right?
Yeah, he had some of the most shots in the league, I think, in the playoffs. He had 23 and I guess 5 last night or something like that. He's certainly up in the high 20s, if not 30. Sometimes you just snake pit. He certainly did have better opportunities. He was shooting a lot from the perimeter early in the series, which has sort of been an issue for him during the season. I mean, his best game was against his former club in Columbus. When he scored, he got into a fight. I mean, he really looked more engaged and active and more like the elite power forward he has been in the regular season in his career when he scored, 30 goals or more 7 times and throw a couple 40-goal seasons in there as well. So he's going to be a big key to Pittsburgh, to the Rangers competing against Pittsburgh, no doubt about it.
You mentioned Giroux and Simmons. Besides that Game 6, Simmons was very quiet in this series. Giroux, the goal production wasn't there as he only scored 2 goals in this series, and one of them was an empty netter at the end of that Game 6. You look at Giroux and Simmons, what went wrong for them in this series, and what did the Rangers do right defensively up against them?
Well, I think they certainly tried to use the body a lot on Giroux. I think I don't want to say targeted him. That sounds like you wanted to hurt him. I just think they wanted to let him know that someone was going to be around him. They weren't going to give him much time and space. It's sort of the same strategy that I think they'll use, against Crosby coming up. You really cannot give Giroux or Crosby or players of that level who can score and who have great vision on the ice and are quick, the opportunity to find a teammate or going for a rebound or shoot himself. So, I think that's what they did. With Simmons, I'm a little surprised. I think they just sort of kept him outside of the crease more than he'd like to be. The same thing that they were doing with Hartnell. I mean, the Rangers, one of the strong points of the Rangers, besides Lundqvist, has been their defense. They have 3 of the better defensemen in the league with Saul Girardi and Ryan McDonough, who's going to be, one of the top two-way defensemen in the league, I think, pretty shortly. He's only 24. And Strawman played well as well. The bottom pair is, it's just okay. But the defensemen that are carrying the most minutes, 20, 22, 24 minutes, were the ones that really did a good job, I think, particularly in the last 2 or 3 games of the series.
A few more questions with Steve Zipay, who covers the Rangers for Newsday in New York. And Steve, also, what gave the Flyers a lot of problems, and you mentioned those Rangers defensemen, McDonough, Girardi, Stahl, they're not afraid to put their body in front of the puck. We know that even going back to the John Tortorella days. That shot block gave the Flyers a lot of struggles in this series.
Yeah, 22, I think, last night, including 5 from Girardi and I think 4 from McDonough, 3 from Stallman. It was something that people thought was going to be lost when John Tortorella was fired last year. But I think there's something in the DNA that Tortorella left with this team that helps their work ethic, that helps them compete. It's something they still, carry around with them. Tortorella, probably, used up his welcome here as he probably will in Vancouver and elsewhere. It's just that kind of high-pressure style and sort of bullying and sort of a my way or the highway attitude that doesn't always work now in professional sports. But he's a competitor. He loves to win. He demands the best out of his players, and he'll let them know about it, if he doesn't love what he's seeing. And I think some of that rubbed off, and you saw the shot blocking, as you mentioned, certainly pick up in the big games and the games they had to win.
Steve Zipay joins us right now, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Rangers come up with a crucial Game 7 victory against the Philadelphia Flyers last night. They will go on to take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Steve, the Penguins registered the second most points in the Eastern Conference, 15 more points than the Rangers in the regular season. They're obviously led by two terrific players in Malkin and Crosby. How do you think the Blue Shirts match up with the Penguins?
Well, given the schedule, given the fact, and this is what I would say this about the Flyers too, if they had won last night, the schedule has been pretty brutal, thanks to the need for NBC to get certain games on, and the issue of rink availability at this time of year when you have arena football and concerts and the WNBA and maybe an NBA team in some arenas, so you're forced to play back-to-backs. To make a long story short, I think the Rangers are going to have a struggle in Pittsburgh, where they usually do. They don't have a great record at Consol Energy Center. And they're certainly a little weary after an 82-game season and another 7-game series. It's going to come down to what we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation. The Rangers are going to need a full team effort against a team that plays very well 5-on-5, meaning Pittsburgh, that has a very good power play, I think number 1 in the league during the regular season. And the only weakness I can possibly see is in goal, where you saw what happened in the Columbus series. Marc-Andre Fleury, certainly wilted in a lot of the games,
right.
Gave up a ton of goals. I mean, I guess 6 of those games ended up 4-3 one way or another. And the Rangers have to exploit that somehow. I mean, get shots on them and don't give up if you're behind, because if you look at the track record, they have a shot. But, it's going to be an extremely tough series. Pittsburgh is a little more rested, and it's going to be tough if they go out to a 2-0 lead.
Yeah, the Rangers and Flyers were forced to play 4 games in 6 days, and AV said in his post-game press conference they were going to prepare for the Penguins that night. So they were probably up late last night preparing for Pittsburgh. Do you expect that to play a little bit of a factor coming out of the gates for the Rangers?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think if the Rangers didn't have to travel, and again, the Penguins are something like 26-9 in that building this season. They're very comfortable there. Again, they've been rested. Sometimes that can hurt. Sometimes I think, you might get a little rusty if you haven't played, for several days, or in this case, it won't be a full week, I don't think, for Pittsburgh. But the Rangers are certainly resting today. They're flying to Pittsburgh a little later in the day, I think around 3. So they'll skate in the morning, but I think that'll be a very limited skate. I mean, a lot of today, as you said, there'll be meetings and video and chalkboard sessions on how to cope with a new opponent. And then, of course, during the series, which are each like little mini seasons, the team that makes the better adjustments and the team that lifts their level throughout the series is going to come out as the winner at the end.
Before we let Steve Zipay here, final question with the Newsday reporter who covers the New York Rangers. You look at this Rangers power play. They've been brutal in the Stanley Cup playoffs. In the first 2 games of this series, they were looking good. But after that, you mentioned it, they were 0 for 21, and they weren't successful last night and in Game 6 as well. Will AV make any changes on this power play, or is he going to continue to stick with the same guys that he's throwing out there?
I think they'll probably try to get a little more movement and a little more quickness, a little more pace out of the guys they have to start. If it doesn't work, you might see someone like Rafael Diaz, a defenseman that was acquired from Vancouver, who's pretty quick and has played a little bit on the power play in about 10 games near the end of the season. And, again, I mentioned Chris Kreider before. If he comes back at some point, he is a big body in front of the net. He's got a lot of skill. He's got a lot of speed. And he could be an X factor, particularly on the power play, where he played fairly well during the season. I mean, granted, the Rangers only finished the 14th or 15th on the power play during the year, so they've certainly been streaky. But sometimes, again, in a short series, that's all you need. I mean, you just need timely power play goal at a critical point in the game, and it may just swing the momentum.
Steve, we appreciate the time. It was good to see you up in the press box in both Philadelphia and New York. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Enjoy Pittsburgh, my friend.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve Zipay right there covers the Rangers for Newsday in New York. We'll take a quick break here. WHIP radio time in Philadelphia is 11:29, and we'll be back right after these short messages.